Hello everybody, Jeffrey Way here with net.tutsplus.com with the new screencast of the week. This time I'm taking a design that we wireframed on Vector Tuts Plus. We added the colors and the overall design on PSD Tuts Plus, and we are now going to take this Photoshop design, convert it to an HTML and CSS website. So if you did not read these, you don't need to, but if you do want to learn how to create the wireframe and the design overall, I will link to these articles because this is actually part 3 of this series. If you don't want to watch those, you really don't need to, because all we're going to be doing is taking a design and converting it to an actual website. So we have the wireframe, we have the design, and this is the final product. Let me zoom out just a little bit because of my low resolution. This is the final product that we'll end up with, okay? And that's what we're going to build today. This design was created by Sean. Sean is the editor of PSD Tuts and Vector Tuts, and he built this design with the 960 grid system. So that's what we're going to use also. So you're going to visit 960.gs, and at the very top you'll just click the download button. So now I'm going to close out these windows, but I will add links for you. And let's get started. So I've created a blank folder called App Site, and this is where our project is going to be stored. And here is the 960 download. So I'm going to open this up, and we're going to get everything we need from it. So if you can see here, we have the licenses, a README, sketch sheets, and templates. Because we've already had the design, we don't need the templates. We don't need the sketch sheets. We should probably hold on to the license. But for now, all we need is the code. And if we go in here, you'll see these files. We need the text, reset, and 960. Now truthfully, all you need to make this work is the 960. However, he does include a text and reset for your convenience. So we'll go ahead and save ourselves some time and use those as well. So I'm going to copy that in. And so now within our project, I can go ahead and delete 960. Now within our project, we have a CSS folder with 3 files. Let's get started. I'm going to drag this file into TextMate and maximize this. And we're going to do a little bit more. We need one more file. New file is style.css. Now I should note that we're going to be working with 4 style sheets here, but when you export your project, it's always a good idea to group those into one. But sometimes it's helpful when you're designing to do it separately. Okay? But you'll lower your HTTP requests if you group those all into one before you export your final site. So I'm going to create our index.html file, and I am also going to create a new folder for our assets. So new folder, and this is going to be assets. Now I've just paused for 2 seconds so that I could grab the assets, and this is the files that you'll get from PSD Tuts. And it includes the wireframe, and it includes the logo, and the final PSD that we're working with. So let's open up App Site, and open up our assets folder, and we can just copy this in. Okay, just like that. So let's come back to TextMate and make sure that we have everything. Let's create our basic outline. This just declares the doc type and the opening tags, and now we want to import all of our style sheets. So I'm just going to drag those in right here. Okay. Too bad, I wish I wasn't on such a low resolution. That's a little bit better. And if we want to clean these up just really quickly, we don't really need to style the media and the title and the chart set. And one more. Okay, and now we're not really going to touch this file until we go through Photoshop and slice everything out. So that's the last thing we need to do, is create a new folder for our images, and I'm going to call this IMG. All right, so I'm going to save everything, hide this, and now we're going to open Photoshop and close this out. And if I zoom out just a little bit, this is the finished design that Sean developed on PSD Tuts. So what we need to do here now is figure out everything that we need to cut out. Remember, if we can accomplish it with CSS, we should do that. So if taking a quick look, we need this background right here underneath Light Up Your Phone. We need the iPhone. We need this download button. We do not need any of the headings. We can mimic that, but we should note that if you look, the headings have a little bit of a drop shadow. We can mimic that with CSS using the text shadow property. We need the generic app icon, and then this Aurora icon. We need the logo. We do not need these. Well, we might need a little background for the button, but we can always come back to that later. Let's see here. Just taking a look, we will need the Twitter bird, and we will need this, once again, a generic skin for a screenshot, and really that's about it. And we should get this little graphic right here. So if you've never cut up a design before, don't worry, it's pretty easy. You have two options. You can use the slice tool, or you can kind of use a copy and paste method, which is what I prefer most. So let's first start by getting the logo. So I'm going to make sure auto select is turned on, and I'm going to click on the logo, and you'll see down here in the right corner the logo shows up. So what we would normally do is we would select it by using Command or Alt click, and it would select it, and we would hit Command or Alt C, and that's going to copy it. We're then going to go to a new file and paste it in. And if I were to select a black color, you would see that logo. But if you notice, the styling is gone, so I'm going to close that out. And what we need to do here is when you copy it, you're not actually copying the effects that it contains. So instead, why don't we rasterize it and convert to Smart Object. And now if we copy it, once again, Command C, Command N for new, it will automatically have the width and height values of what you just copied. And now I'm going to hit Command V. Okay, and now you can see it does contain those styles. We want this to be a transparent, so it can go on top of any background. So I'm going to turn off the background, and then I'm going to go to the very top and down to Save for Web and Devices, or I can hit Shift Option Command S. Okay, now you'll see here that ugly little background there, and that's because we have it set to a ping 8. We want to have alpha transparency, so we're going to change that to 24, and that will allow for it. Okay. So you can experiment with some of the features at the bottom. You see interlaced increases it, so we're not going to do that. I'm going to hit save, and we're going to save it to our app site, the images, and we're going to call it logo. So that took a couple minutes, but once you get into the swing of things, you can do this very quickly. So the next one, let's get the phone. I'm going to click on it. Of course, always make sure auto select is turned on. So you can see here, it seems that there are 3. Yeah. There are 3 of them. So I'm going to take all of these, and I'm going to hit Command E, or should be somewhere up here. I don't even use these anymore. There should be a merge option somewhere, but just hit Command E. And that merges them into one layer. I'm going to copy it, or I'm going to select it, just pressing Command Select, copy, new, paste, transparency, save for web and devices. And this is a little bit large. We might be able to save a little bit on this after we're done. But we'll keep it like that, and we're going to call it phone.png. And that's it. It's really quite simple. So let's try to do one really quickly. And you always want to make sure when you come back to your design that you undo, you hit step backward so you don't save those merges. You want to always go back to the original design. So next, let's get the App Store. So let's see how quickly we can do this. Click on it. Copy it, new, paste, transparency, save for web and devices, and we'll call this app graphic. Okay, that one's done. I'm going to hit Command D to deselect it, and let's see what else. Now let's get this little icon right here. You can always play with the eye tool to make sure that you're getting everything you need. We don't want to get this background here. We're going to do that differently. So I'm going to take that and see what we can do. Convert to Smart Object, copy it, and once again it's going to be transparency, and we're going to call it Aurora. And we're going to deselect and continue on. Make sure I go all the way back to the beginning. Now let's get the button. So sometimes you may have to play around with things just a little bit. Let's move that up. So for example, if I click on this, you'll see Okay, well we have the background, but that's not everything. Let's see what else. Okay, so we have the button, so we need to select that. I'm going to hold down Shift and select that one as well. Let's see this next one. Yep, that's the little arrow. Let's see what else. No, we don't need that, but we do need to download now. So there it is. So I'm going to hit Command to continue selecting. You'll see those remain selected at the bottom. Download now and from the iTunes Store. So now I'm going to hit Command E to merge those together. And if I copy it, new, paste, you can see that has everything. Turn off the background and save for web and devices. And we'll call this download button. Okay. Deselect and go all the way back. Okay, so getting pretty easy. Now let's get this snapshot. Yeah, we can get that. Convert to smart object, copy it. Whoops. I must have done something wrong. Let's try that again. And try that again. Copy it, new, paste. There we go. And once again, going to be transparency, and we'll just call this. And I may change these later because truthfully I'm working off the finished project and I cannot remember how I named these. So if the names are different, I will let you know. But we'll call this generic, or we'll just call it screenshot. Okay. And let's continue on. We need to get the Twitter bird. So auto select is turned on. I'm going to click on it and it's saved as a bitmap. Copy, new, paste, transparency. Save for web and devices, save, Twitter bird. You can always use the slice tool if you like. I think this method, especially when you're not explaining it, I can do it really quickly, so I would prefer it. Now we need to actually get the background, because if you zoom in, you'll see one thing here. You see there's this little bit of a shadow here. So my first instinct was to, when I created this, was I just grabbed this, like something like that, and I tiled it. But it's always important to remember, Sean, obviously, he's probably not a web designer specifically. He's probably more of a graphic designer. So you can see here, he actually has a shadow on the very left edge, and I did not notice that. So when I copied it and tiled it, it actually tiled that shadow, so it almost looked like kind of a checkered pattern. So we want to make sure we're not going to add a shadow to the very edge of the window, but we will add a shadow down here. So instead, let's just copy this right there. Okay? So this could be multiple layers that we're copying, so sometimes it's easier to go to Layer, Flatten Image, OK, and now we're working with a single layer, and I can hit Copy, New, Paste, and we have that. Okay, so we're going to save that, and I'm going to call it, and let's see here. We don't need it to be 24 because there's not going to be ping, there's not going to be alpha transparency, so let's try a few out. Ping 8 is 205. Let's try a JPEG because there is a shadow. And we're coming to 356. We could lower that, but it seems like ping might be the way to go here. So we'll hit save, and we're going to call it HTML BG. Okay. So close that out and go all the way back. And I'm using the shortcut, in case you're interested, Command Option Z to step back. Okay. And we need to do one more. If you look here at the bottom, let's check. Yeah, we have another string here. So we can't just copy this whole bottom area right here. If we were to do that, we really can't, because then what happens if whoever uses this template, they take the About I Love My Apps and they add 2 additional paragraphs. That text would then spill into this little bottom area. So we want to make sure that it can expand. So we're going to have to separate those into 2 different images because we have a shadow. So we'll simply take something like that. Something like that. And once again, I'm going to flatten the image just to make it easier for me. Copy, new, paste, save for web and devices. Ping 8 is fine. And we'll call this footer BG. Okay. And next, we're going to do the exact same thing for this one. And I'm going to make sure I go a little bit over it. That way I pick up the shadow. And if you need to zoom in so you can actually see where the shadow ends, you'll see it ends right there. And we don't need to go all the way down because we can set a background color, so we'll just go like right around there. Layer, flatten image, Copy, new, paste, save for web and devices, pin gate is fine, and we'll just call that bottom BG. Okay. So let's see, we have the logo, we have the Aurora. I cannot remember if I got this generic icon or not. I'm going to assume that I have, but if I didn't, it's just the exact same way. Let's see what else. We got the graphic. We now need to get this actual background for the light up your phone. So we need to think about a couple things. We don't want to copy the text. So instead, let's just copy the background and maybe this $2.99 symbol. So I'm going to click on it and let's see what this covers. Okay, so we have that. Let's also get, we don't need that. Let's also get this little icon at the top. Okay, so we need that. And we need $2.99, so there's that. I'm going to hit Command and select that one as well. And then we also need the very background again. If I can find it, there it is. So I'm going to hit Command as well. I'm going to hit Command E to merge those. And let's try turning it off. And yeah, that gets almost the whole thing. So copy it, new layer, paste, zoom out, and that should be good. Let's make it a transparency. Actually, you know what? Let's experiment just a little bit. Let's go to Save for Web and Devices, and if we're doing it as transparency, it's going to be much heavier because there are a lot of gradients in here, and usually a JPEG is the way to go. So you'll take a look with ping 24. We're getting about 104K, which is pretty darn big. So why don't we instead set the background color equal to whatever the background color is on the site, if we can get away with that, and I think we can. So if you go, it's on top of this bluish gray background. So I'm using the eyedropper tool to grab the hex value, copy it, and now I'm going to go back here and we'll set the background equal to that color. Okay, and now if I go to the corner, you'll see in the very top left corner it has our color. So now I'm going to save for Web and Devices, and this time, because we don't need transparency, we can save it as a JPEG. And you'll see if we do we want it to look nice. So we're on 65 quality. We've just reduced the JPEG to 70K. Or I'm sorry, 19. Let's go up to 70. We've just adjusted it to 22K, which is a big savings. Go to that, and we'll go banner, BG. Close that out. Go all the way back to the beginning. Okay, I'm going to zoom out. So we've got the logo. We have this. We have that. We have the background. We have the button. We have the phone. We have the graphic, we have the screenshot, we have all the backgrounds. I think we have everything that we need. So if we need to, we'll come back and maybe get an extra. We might want to do something about one of these little backgrounds, because if you take a look at the very bottom, he's using actually 3 levels to kind of make that nice inset. He has a darker color, then a lighter color, then an in-between color. We might want to copy that out and get the background, but if we can do that all later. So that's going to conclude the slicing portion of this. The next part 2 is going to be creating the HTML for it. So let's begin. What I'm going to do now is stop, and then I will come back in a few minutes and we'll start on part 2. Okay, that should be instantaneous for you, but welcome back to part 2, and now we're going to continue on to TextMate, and we will write the HTML for our project. So I'm going to hide this, and if we open up our page and view it in the browser, we have a blank page because we haven't added anything just yet. How we want it. So let's go back to TextMate and begin. First things first, we need to add the title. It's going to be I love my apps. And that should be good for the head tag right now. Now we're going to wrap everything within a container div. So try that again. Container. It's always a good idea to label the end of your divs just for convenience. And now it's really just a matter of creating the markup. It's a matter of just looking at your design and visualizing how it should be. So undo that. If you look, if I can go back, there we go. We should have a header at the very top. So everything should be wrapped in a container div. But at the very top with the logo and the navigation, that's probably a good spot for a header. So let's do that right now. Div, header. And within it, we are going to add our logo. So I wish I had a little more room. Why don't we do it like that? There we go. Okay, so we're going to add, we could use image replacement, or we could place it within an H1 tag and then use the text indent, or text indent and push it off the screen. It seems like lately that's being looked down upon, and I've seen some people from Google say that it's best just to use an image tag, and then you have the alt. If images are turned off, you have the alt tag to replace the heading. So we'll do that, and we stored it as image in the images folder, and we called it logo.png. Okay, and the alt is going to be I love my apps. If I save that and come back to Firefox and refresh the page, we now have our logo. Good. Let's continue on. The next step is we should probably allow the user to click on this logo to return to the home page, right? You've probably done that before. So we're going to wrap it within an anchor tag and then place the image as a child, refresh the page, and now we can select it, and that could send us to any page, in this case just back to the home page, or just a generic link that you could then fill. Next, let's do an unordered list for our navigation items. We are displaying an unordered list, so we should be using a UL. The first one is going to be list item, anchor tag. It's going to link to nowhere, but it's called about. So just to clarify, we are doing this section right here. And we have about, app, support, blog, and contact. Remember, we're not going to touch any design until we've created our markup. So I'm going to duplicate this. Let's see, we have 5 total, 3, 4, 5. And we're going to have about, apps, support, blog, if I can remember them, blog, and contact. Now we need to remember, if we come back and I zoom in, you'll see that there is the apps, which is the page we're obviously on, is styled differently to let the user know that they've selected it. So we need to add something to hook on to that. So what we'll do here is within the LI, we'll add a class of selected, and this is very common. Okay, that should do it for the header. Let's go back to Firefox, refresh the page, and our header is now finished. Let's come down and continue to the next step. Will be the apps section. Now, truthfully, this may not be the best name as far as semantics go, but it's all I could think of. So now we're going to style this section right here. We could place it within the header as well, but I think it was easier to give it its own div. So we're going to have these generic apps as well as the graphic. Okay. Div ID equals apps. And within it, we are going to first add an unordered list again, because we're going to have a list of items. And we'll do image source, and we called it img, and let's see, generic app.png. And we'll just give it an alt tag of app. Close our A tag, and actually I think he called it, let's open up Photoshop again, he called it app name. So after the image tag, we'll just write right there, app name. Okay, so we need to have a total of 5 of these again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the second one is called Aurora, but I believe the remaining ones are still called app name. So what we need to do here is make sure that we add a different image tag for this second one, as well as, once again, we need to give the user feedback, so we need something to latch onto to style this one differently. So within the second one, we will add a class, and this time it'll be current, because we're going to need special styling for that. Okay. And let's see, the name of it is app button. Just for the record, I'm using my original set of images, so if you see one or if it's named differently than you remembered, you can always just click on it, and we can go to right click, and we can do reveal app in Finder, and then we can open it that way. And you can see there it is. Okay. So we have app button. That should be fine for our unordered list. And then finally, we need to add that graphic. And just to clarify, I am speaking of this one right here. So we will wrap that within an image, And once again, I'm wrapping it with an anchor tag because it should be clickable. So img source equals img slash, and I called it, at least the first time around, I called it iPhone graphic.ping. And the alt is going to be just something like App Store. And I'm going to give it an ID of graphics so I can latch onto it if I need to. I'll explain that a little bit more later. And that should do it for our apps section. Save it. Let's see our progress. Remember, if we haven't done any styling yet, this is perfect. Come down, and the next step we need to do is the actual banner. So we come back to Photoshop. You can see I need to get this area. Whoops. Not a good idea. I need to get this area, so that'll include the light up your phone text, the download button, the price, and the phone. So let's go back to TextMate and let's continue on. We'll do div ID equals banner. And keep in mind I haven't actually shown you the 960 portion of this, but we're going to get to it shortly. And I'll actually probably do that in just a moment. And banner. Okay. So the first thing we need to do is get that heading text that he has. If you need to, you can just select it and copy it like so. And it's called Light Up Your Phone. So we should place that within, maybe an H2 tag sounds appropriate. And next we need the paragraph. And you can just copy that. Now we also need to pay attention to the fact that Aurora app is styled differently than the rest of the text, so we should also add a way to latch onto that. Okay, and you can see Aurora app right here. So what I'll do is wrap it in strong tags. That way I can target that text specifically and style it differently. Oh, the fun of a low resolution. Okay, so we have our text. The next step we need to do is add the let's add the download button. Once again, it should be a link, and within it, img source is img, and I called it download button. And to clarify, this corresponds to this button right here. Okay. Download button.png. The alt is going to be download now from the iTunes App Store. And I'm also going to give it an ID of download because I will need to latch onto that somehow. Try to make it a little bit bigger. Okay. So that's that. And then the final thing I need to add, if I save it and come back, we have that. We do need the actual, the phone. We're going to set this little Aurora background actually as a background. That makes sense, right? But we are going to add that phone and then position it accordingly. So after it, we will add the img source equals img slash phone.png. Alt is going to be light up your iPhone. That can be anything you want, really. And I don't think that needs to be a link, but I am going to add an ID because I will have to target that specifically to position it. We are finished with our banner. See, it's really quite easy. So let's continue on, and now we need to get to our main section. So if we come down, we need to get all of this section right here. All of that. So if that's the main section, let's call it main. Div main. Okay. And let's think the first thing we should do is it's separated into 3 columns, and this is where the 960 grid really comes in handy. And once again, I will explain that shortly. So we need to think how we want to name this. If I were to just call it maybe the first div Aurora, the second div features, and the third would be testimonials, could you imagine if maybe a month down the road he decides, let's not show features here in this second column, let's show, I don't know, buy it now information. Well, then we could change it, but then buy it now information would be within a div called features. So remember, don't ever name something according to specifics. Name it according to what it is. So you might call something button. You might call something header. But you would never call it something features. You would never call it features because it could change. Now, truthfully, when you're doing columns like this, it can be a little tough to think of the best way to name. Because I'm not too familiar with this design or what it would be, I'm just going to call it something like sub1 for subdiv. That way we could, if we did something like left div or something like that, once again, what if we decided to display that div on the right? then the div would be on the right, but it would be within a div called left, and that makes no sense at all. So always be thinking about stuff like that. We'll play it really safe, maybe too safe, and call it sub1. So we need 3 of these, correct? So I'm going to copy that. 2, 3. And the first one we will do is we need to get the Aurora heading and then some text. I'm going to go ahead and copy that text. And then we have a screenshots heading and a list of images. So let's start with a heading 3, Aurora, and then some text. Clean that up a little bit. And then, I think I said there's another heading called screenshots. And then a list of images. Once again, a list of images. Let's use an unordered list. IMG source, and we used a placeholder called screenshot.png. And we'll call it screenshot just for now. And close our anchor tag, close our list item. Okay, so let's copy that. Once again, if you're in TextMate and you're wondering how I'm doing this, it's Shift-Control-D for duplicate. And we need a total of 6. So 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, let's go back to Firefox, refresh the page, scroll down. We have Aurora, some text, screenshots, and a list of screenshots. Let's make sure that's correct. Aurora, text, screenshots, list of screenshots. That takes care of sub 1. Now sub 2, we need a heading. This should be the same heading as screenshots. And then we have a list of features. Div sub 2, sub 3. And what we will do here is add a heading 4. Let's add a little bit of spacing. It makes me more comfortable. Heading 4, and that's going to be features. And we will have a long list of features. Now, it's debatable. You should always think, is this something that should be clickable? I don't know. I interpret it as just a long list of features, so I don't think we need to add an anchor tag to that. So what I will do is just paste in that text and close out the list item. And let's see how many we need. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 16. So once again, I'm going to go back to the very front and duplicate this 15 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay. And let's see if that takes care of everything. Yes. So now the final one we need to do is this column 3. Looks like first we have a little brief description. So I'm going to wrap that within just a paragraph tag. Sounds fine. And the next step is, looks like we have a list of testimonials. So I'm going to copy that. Now we could put these each in block quotes, but I don't really want to do that. I'm just going to once again place it within an unordered list. Okay, I think that's just fine. And we have a total of 5 of those. So we need to duplicate this 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I think that takes care of the main section. Yeah. Let's go to Firefox, refresh the page, and now we have it. We're doing great. Now let's move down, and we got to get the footer. So the footer is divided into 4 columns, and let's get into it. So after the main, we need to think about something here. I debated on whether to go through this now because it does focus a little bit on style, but I think it's important. If you come back here, if you look here, we have our background, and this background right here extends for the whole page. But then we have a new background right here that should also extend for the entire window. So if you can imagine, what if we placed our footer directly within the container? Remember, the container wraps it like this. If we placed it directly in there, this dark blue background would be cut off at the walls. It would not extend past these little marching ants. So how could we set it up where the footer's background extends for the entire window. And the answer is we actually have to break outside of our container and start again. So hopefully that makes sense. It's a little hard to explain. But we're going to get rid of the container. Or we're not getting rid of it, but we are going to close the container. That way we can start a new div and not have anything clipped. And the way we can do this is, I'm going to do it the simple way and then show you what we have to do to make it work. Div and footer, and first we're going to have 4 divs, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Once again, I'm not going to name those div ID equals our AppLove blog, div ID equals support. That's not a smart idea. Instead, I think we can probably get away with just using generic divs. So the first one is we have about I love my apps, and then we have 2 paragraphs and then a button. So the first thing that we'll do here is we're going to place that within an h4 tag, about I love my apps, and then a paragraph tag. Scroll down just a little bit, clean this up, and if you remember, he had 2 paragraphs, so I'm going to copy that, paste that in, and then finally we had a button. It's going to be an anchor tag, links nowhere. I'm going to give it a class of button. That way we can style all of those buttons the same way. And it's going to be called Learn More. Okay, so let's make sure we have everything. Heading, 2 paragraphs, button. Now let's move to our next one. And if we zoom in, we have a heading, our AppLove blog, and then we have, looks like recent items from the blog as well as a date. So let's do h4 and our AppLove blog. And let's see, we're going to have a list of recent items from the blog, so let's put it within an unordered list. That's not altogether essential, but I would rather do it that way. It's going to be a link later, maybe with a program like WordPress, you could fill the actual links so that they go to those specific pages. I'm going to copy that. And we could probably put this on its own page. But remember, the date is styled differently. The date has this kind of blue-gray color. So once again, we have to be able to latch onto that. So I'm going to wrap it within a span, like so. And then close out our anchor tag and close out our list item. So let's see if I can clean this up here a little bit. Okay, that's fine. And close out our span. That should be a little bit better. I hate when it drops down to a new line. Okay. And we had a total of 3 of those, right? 2, 3. Let's make sure. Photoshop, 1, 2, 3, and then once again another button. And this is where that class of button comes in handy because we don't have to continue styling it every single time. We simply do class equals button, and this one was called read the blog. Okay, that takes care of our AppLove blog. Let's see the third one. It's a little boring, so if you get the idea, feel free to fast forward a few minutes. Support, and then a heading. H4 support, and then heading. And then finally, I believe that one has a button as well. And what did we call this? I think we called it Need Help. Let's make sure. Yep, support, paragraph, need help button. Final one is Twitter, I love my apps. So I'm just going to select that. If I can find it, there it is, and copy that. Final one, div, H4, Twitter, I love my apps. Now, once again, take a look. pay attention to detail here. Twitter, but then I love my apps is smaller. So how can we do that? Let's place it within a small tag. Doesn't that make sense? And like so. That way we can target that specifically. Alright, I've already forgotten what's next. So now we have a list of tweets. Those could be links, but I'm not going to bother doing that. Though truthfully, it probably should be a link. But you never know. If you did have it a link, it would link to the specific tweet. Let's see how to do this. No anchor tag. And once again, we need to style the time. About 6 hours ago, that's styled differently. So let's go ahead and take care of that as well. And we will do span. Like so. Okay, that's good. And let's see how many we need. A total of 3 of those, right? 2, 3. And then finally we have a button, but this button's a little different because we have the Twitter bird within it. So let's see how we can best do this. We're going to, after the unordered list, have an anchor tag. Give it a class of button because we do want to pick up those styles, but we also want to do a little bit more. And within it, we're going to write follow us, because if you remember, I think it says that there. Yeah, follow us and then the bird. Follow us. And then also I'm going to add img source equals img/Twitter. Bird is what we called it. And the alt will be follow us. Although we've already added that there. I guess follow us is fine. It might be smarter to change that later, but it's not a big deal right now. And that should be good. So that should take care of that. There's our closing div and our closing footer. Go back to Firefox, and it does look like a big mess, but this is exactly what we want when we're building our markup. That way, if CSS is completely turned off, they can still navigate it. It doesn't look very good. But so now the next step, the final step with the markup, is going to be this very bottom section. So once again, we have another background that extends for the entire window. We cannot put these two backgrounds together because, as I said, I believe about 15 minutes ago, what if this text within About I Love My Apps is 5 paragraphs? It would then spill in over to the second part of this background below. So that needs to be able to stretch as much as it needs to. So we have to create a new div. But in addition to that, well, I'll explain this later. Let's do it right now. Div ID equals bottom. We're going to modify this shortly. But I want to get the basic markup first. So we're going to do paragraph, and let's always save your time if you can, simply by, if I can target it, there it is, by copying and pasting. Okay, and we should make this a link, shouldn't we? Okay, all rights reserved, that's correct. And then we have a list of links once again. Apps, about, support, blog, contact. If you go back to the very top, you'll see we have the exact same thing at the very top. So why don't we save ourselves some time, scroll to the top, grab this, paste it in. Now if we want just to target it, we could give it an ID of footer nav, but truthfully I don't think that's even necessary. In a case like this, we wouldn't really need to be specific, unless of course we later added another unordered list, in which case we would need to add this ID. And if we come down to the very bottom, you'll look, excuse me, you'll see apps is selected, so we need to add a class. I'm sorry, what did I do here? I copied the wrong one. Let's go back to the very top again. Sorry about that. Let's copy, where is it? There it is. Sorry about that. Down to the bottom and paste. Much better. And class is selected is just fine for that. So we close out our bottom div. And if we go back, Firefox, refresh, we have the bottom. Okay, here's what we need to go over. we have a footer div and we have a bottom div. So let's imagine we're styling the footer div, and we say we want this footer div to be centered on the page just like the text above, but we also want it to have a background that extends for the entire user's window. There's really no way to do that, because as soon as we set the width of this footer div and set the margins equal to auto to center it on the page, as soon as we add a background color, that background will not extend past these squiggly lines right here. Okay? It would just be cut off. So, considering that, we need to wrap our footer div within another div that wraps it. Excuse me. That way, that will have a background that extends for the entire window, and then we can specifically say the div within the wrap will be centered. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. It sounds a little like maybe even a little divitis, but it's not. You actually have to do it. So within our footer div right here, we're going to add another div called footer wrap. Okay. Now I would normally indent this, but we have such little real estate on this low resolution. I'm not. And what I'll do instead is end footer wrap, like so. And remember, the exact same thing holds true for the bottom. The exact same thing. So we have to do that again. Div ID equals bottom wrap, and excuse me, and we'll close that out. Okay, I think that is just about everything we need for our markup. So come back to Firefox, and if we refresh the page, we have all of our content and no styling. So this concludes part 2. My original plan was to split these into 3 videos, but truthfully it's just a lot more work. So what I'm going to do on the post page is I'm going to have links to the specific time for when you can begin part 2, part 3. That way I don't have to export 3 videos and upload them. It's just a big drag. So welcome to part 3. And we will now begin working on our styling. So let's go back to the very top. If you remember, we've already imported a few style sheets here, but we need to fix these actually. The reset should be first. Then we have our 960. Then we're going to have our text, and then we're going to have our style sheets. Remember, when you export, let's add this right now. When you export, try to group these into one style sheet to save on HTTP requests. Okay. So the first thing we want to do is, I know it can definitely, you load it in Firefox and you take a look and it's like, oh man, I don't even know where to start. The first start is, because we're working with the 960 framework, we need to add 960 tags. Don't worry if you're not familiar with it, it's pretty easy. We're going to be working with a 12-column grid. So if I come and hit Command H, you can see that Sean developed this with the 960 and he used the 12-column grid. So if you look in here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There's 12 columns. And so we can style these. So let's say we want to build something. For instance, let's say here we have 3 columns. If you'll notice, the first column is 1, 2, 3, 4. So that would be equal to 4 columns. The next one is 1, 2, 3, 4, obviously, because it's 12 columns divided into 3. Or, I'm sorry, a 12 grid system divided into 3 columns would be 4 each. In the same fashion, here we have 4 columns, so each one is divided into 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So the way we can target that, let's go down to the footer, if I can find it, right here. So for each one, if we know that it's going to be 4 columns total, and each one is going to take up the 3 of those grids, we would add a class, and we would add grid _3. And remember, what makes this possible is the 960 file that we imported. So if I were to add that, you can see here, let's find grid 3. You can see grid 3, we float it to the left, we add margins to it, and we set display inline. Okay, so I'm going to make sure that we compress that and come back. And so now let's add that to each one. Copy, grid 3, so that means 6. And the next one, and the final one. Where is it? There it is. So let's save that, come back to Firefox, refresh the page, and you're not going to see anything just yet. And the reason is because we need to clarify our containing div. So if you come up to the very top here, container, we need to specify and tell 960, are we working with it? Just to clarify, the 960 comes with a 12-column grid and a 16-column grid. By the way, if you decide to use one and not the other, you can always go and find all the instances of container 16 or grid 16 or things like that and remove them because they are not necessary. Once again, because we're using the 12-column grid, we're going to add a class to our container div, and we're going to call it container_12. Now remember, if you're working with the 960 framework, this is assuming you're building a website that is 960 pixels wide. So we're going to save that. Come back, refresh the page. Okay. So now we need to do a little bit more work. Let's come back here, and we need to add in the rest of our grids. So if we look at Photoshop, we know the header, that can just take up the entire length. So what we'll do is here, header is going to be class grid 12. And we're going to copy that. The next one is the apps. I'm going to do the same thing for that. And I'll explain specifically why a little bit later. Usually it wouldn't be totally necessary in this case. So we have the banner, and then we have the main. We'll come back to the main div. And we have the footer. Oh, of course. We need to remember we closed out our container div, so now we need to specify a new container for our grid. So we will do that to footer. And the class is going to be container12. Remember, when you set a class of container12, it's really important that I clarify this. Container12. When we set a class, it automatically applies a width and sets the margins to auto, and that will center it on the page. Okay. So we have a class of container12. Each of them have grid 3. And then we need to do the same thing for bottom. So class equals container12. And that should be fine. Okay, and now you can see it's been separated in 4 columns like that at the very bottom. Okay, so lots of work. Let's get right into it. Go to the very top. I'm going to go into, let's go into our style.css file and get started. The very first thing we need to do is add the background to our HTML. If you ever feel confused, just like I have no idea where to start, just start at the very beginning and it'll slowly begin to take shape. So HTML, let's add our background. And the way we can get our background color, remember we've created a background image, but we want to make sure when the background image cuts out, like right around here, we need to make sure that the background color takes over. So I'm going to simply take the eyedropper tool, copy that hex value, and come back, and the background is going to be that color. And we're going to set the URL equal to that background image that we set. And it's going to be img/html bg is what we called it. Now we want to make sure that it repeats along the x-axis, but not the y. Come back, refresh the page, and I'm going to go ahead and close that out because we don't need it any longer. And now we have our background that extends. Okay. So now we're already beginning to get there. And by the way, I'm on such a low resolution you probably couldn't even tell, but if I zoom out you can see we are working on a centered layout, and that's because we applied the container12. And I'm assuming you guys are new to this, so I'm going to go ahead and remove this just to show you. And you see how it pushes back to the left. Container12 adds the width and sets the margins equal to auto. Okay. So now let's go back to our style sheet and continue on. The first thing we're going to do, and what I'm going to do to make this a little easier and a little less boring is, well, that's not very cool. There we go. Give me just a moment. So now we're going to style this directly in the browser just to make it to give you a little more feedback. And we're going to set the color of the body. All the text needs to be white. You can see here, white, 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 white. And actually, let's just make sure it is white. And if I double select it and I click on the type tool, you can see here that he has set the color to white. Next step, font family. Sean is using Helvetica, and Arial is very similar, almost to the point you can't tell. And we're going to fall back. So what I'm going to do is make this a little bigger and zoom out even more. So now we have white text, and now let's do some general styles. The first one, A, we're going to make sure that color is white too, because by default, browser styling will override the body styling and give it that blue color. So we're going to do that. And also we're going to style the button. And I don't want to do that just yet, but what we're going to do here, so I don't forget, style button. Okay. Next step is going to be, sorry, I'm trying to go through here and figure out the best way. So now let's do container. And we've already set a width to it, so all we need to do is, and I believe, nope, we need to set a positioning context. So let's do position relative, which is always just a good idea. And we're going to set some padding top. You see how it's right up there against the very top? Let's fix that. Padding top is going to be 15 pixels. And that's going to push it down ever so slightly. Okay, so now let's get started with the header. And we will do header, and you know what, I'm not going to style that specifically, but what I am going to do here is copy and paste this and come back. You know what, it's just really hard to work that way on such a low resolution, so we'll do it like this. And now we're going to do header img, and this is going to target the logo, and we're going to float that to the left. So we come back, and now it's been floated directly to the left. So now we need to take the navigation area and float that, I'm sorry, let me close that out. Take this navigation area and float that to the left, or I'm sorry, to the right. So what we'll do is header img, header nav. And by the way, I'm using kind of this has been kind of a trend lately, just to format your style sheets a little bit better. Any children that you're styling, if it's children, you indent that. So we have our parent, and then within the header we have children, so we indent those. And this is becoming very popular. You'll see it a lot more lately. And we'll do float that to the right, and I'm going to set overflow to hidden, and I'll explain why in just a moment. Do header, let's do header nav li, and we're going to float each of these to the left. So when you float all of the elements, I've said this so many times, when you float all of the elements within a parent, the parent no longer takes up any space. So the way around that is you type overflow hidden, and that forces the parent to contain its children. So if I refresh, now they're pushed all the way to the right, but they still have the list items and the text is wrong, and we want it to look like these little buttons. So let's go back to TextMate and see how we can make that happen. Within our list item, we're going to set a background color. And I'm not going to do this for every single one because I'll expect you to figure it out, but to show you how you get the background color, if you just take the eyedropper tool, select it, and we get that hex value, and then we type background color, is that. The next one is list style, is none. Padding, 6 pixels, 9 pixels. I'm going to show you how I got each one at the very beginning, and then we're going to move a little bit faster. Once again, the ruler is your friend when you're slicing up somebody's design. You can just take here and see like how much space is there really between the text and the border, and you can see around 8 pixels, round up to 9. And let's do the next one. And you can see around 12. So what I ended up going with is 6 and 9. Let me try that again because that definitely doesn't seem correct. Oh yeah, I just did it wrong. 6 pixels, and you can see the height value right up there. And that's how I came to the padding, because we want some breathing room for our text. The height, I specifically set a height of 14 pixels, and if we want to vertically center text within this, we can set a line height as well, and that's the reason. And now, if we come back, refresh the page, we have the squares, but they need to be rounded. You can see like so. So the way we can do that is we're going to use some CSS 3 styling. We're going to do Moz. This targets all Mozilla browsers. Moz border radius is 5 pixels, and WebKit border radius is going to be 5 pixels as well. If we come back now, you can see that they are rounded, but we're still not done. You can see here, Sean, he has multiple layers here, so you can see he has a little outline, and then it looks like a darker outline, and then another one. So the question needs to be, do you want to turn this into an image and use a button, or are you okay with kind of hacking away at your CSS file to as much as you can mimic this? And I'm going to stick with CSS. Border is 1 pixel solid. Once again, I just took the eyedropper tool and checked that, and it came to A3 B5, I'm sorry, I'm reading off my notes. Solid A3B5D4. Yes. So let's come back, refresh the page, and you probably can't even tell. Actually, I can't even tell. Let's go back to make sure it's being targeted correctly. Just a moment. Yeah, it is being working, so that value just isn't coming in. Let's just do it manually. And we're going to set the border, take the eyedropper tool, and we're just going to grab that. Yeah, that is right. Let's go back to TextMate. Okay, I guess I just typed it in wrong. Yeah, and now you get that. So that looks pretty good. So let's go back to TextMate and continue on. Now we want to style the selected one differently. So we will do header, nav, li with the class of selected. Remember, we selected one and gave it a class of selected for the current page. Selected, but we also want to add that exact same style for when the user hovers over a link. So we'll do header, nav, li, hover. Scroll down, and we're going to set a background color, and we're going to set it to 53645, and we are going to add a URL. And now I do not believe I did this with you, so to show you how, let's find it. There it is. You can see Sean, to signify the selected one, he added this. So all I would do here is maybe flatten the image, and then we would just grab this whole thing, maybe right there. I would grab that, and then we would copy, save for the web, and I called it button BG. And then we set the background color of our button equal to this, and that's where you get 536475. Okay, and I'll expect you to do that on your own if you're following along. And I pasted this, and it's going to be within. Remember, we're in a CSS file, so if we want to target our images folder, we have to go back to the root by doing .. then into the images folder, and then the name of the button is called, I've already forgotten, button BG. Okay, and we want it to repeat along the x-axis. And now you can see, if I zoom all the way in, we have a nice little shadow only on that single one. The next thing I want to do is also add a border around it, because we don't want that bluish border all the way around every single one. So if you come back, you'll see these have that light blue, but this one does not. So instead, I grabbed the new value with the eyedropper tool, and I came to 1 pixel solid 161E2A. Okay, and now we got a darker blue color. Okay, so we're definitely getting there. So let's create a new one, and we're going to do nav lia, and we want to make sure that there is no underline, so text decoration equals none, and we're going to make sure we set display block to make sure they take up all of the width of that list item. Okay, and now those are selectable. So let's continue on. That should be fine for the nav. We'll come back and maybe make that better shortly. So the next step is the apps. And we'll do apps, padding, top 28 pixels. Okay, and that just gives a little bit of space from that header. And what we'll probably do is add a little more space on top of that heading as well. Next step is apps UL, and if this would help you, we are styling this area right here. So we have an unordered list and then that little graphic. So apps UL, overflow hidden, once again because we're going to be floating the list items, and we're going to set the display to inline. Okay, so now let's go to the list items, apps ULLI, float each of those list items, set a list style equal to none. Text align, we're going to center the text within the list item, and let's come back, refresh the page, and you see the anchor tag is still underlined, so we don't want that. But let's continue on. I'm going to set the margin left equal to 0, and then we'll add margin right instead. And that way we can make sure it's pushed up right against the edge of our container. And we want the font weight to be bold. Okay? So you see, because I set the margin left equal to 0, it pushes it all the way so it lines up perfectly with the logo. That's what we want. Now, let's continue on. So apps, it's really hard to go through these with you because I don't think we're ready for that just yet. Let's continue on with apps, ULLI, image, and display block. And by doing this, we're going to force the text onto a new line like so. Right? Let's continue on and do apps, ULLIA, and these should be centered, or I'm sorry, indented. Okay, and now we're going to style the anchor tag, and all we're going to say is, don't worry about having an underline, and we're going to set the font size equal to 10 pixels, and that is because, come back to Photoshop, if we measure, sorry, you can probably hear my dog in the background, if we select this and we go to the character palette, you'll see that the font size is 10 point or 10 pixels. Okay, so let's save that, go back to Firefox, refresh the page, and now we have that nice layout. So what we need to grab now is this graphic and push that all the way to the right side. So we can do that by doing, let's go back one level, apps, IMG, and we gave it an ID of graphic if you remember. And all we're going to do here is float that all the way to the right, and it's going to push it up right to the right edge. If I refresh, there we go. Okay, so we're already getting a nice site. So with that finished, we need to work on our banner. And we go right here. There's our banner. So we have a heading, some description, a download button, and our phone. So this will require a decent amount of work. Main banner. And the first thing we'll do is banner. Background is going to be URL. By the way, I just want to clarify, a lot of people like to just paste in big blocks of code, and maybe it does save time and it's a quicker video, but I really don't like the idea of just being given a huge block of code that I'm supposed to decipher. It's easier if I go line by line. Even if it's a little longer for you, you guys always have the option of fast forwarding. So background URL is IMG, and we're going to target that banner BG that we sliced out. And that was a JPEG, remember, so it lowered the file size. No repeat. Okay, and now we've added it. Very good. So if we come down and, oops, banner, H2, and we're going to set a color. And so what we need to do here is just set the color with the eyedropper tool of this text. We could very well use an image, and maybe it would be smarter, but we have a much more flexibility if we just do it as text, so I'm going to do that. And you know what? I'm getting a little bit different value from what I use, so I'm going to change it DBDE. Okay. Now we're going to set a font size of 48 pixels. Once again, I'm not going to do this every time, but it is important to show you the font size. Select it, character palette, font size is 48 pixels. Line height is 58 pixels. 48 line height is 58 pixels. And border bottom is 1 pixel solid. black. If we come back, you'll see right here on the border, it's black. Now it's actually 3 layers, but we're going to only get the black here, and then we'll take care of the bottom later. So solid black, and then padding top. I'm just going to give it some breathing room. Once again, I need to show you at the very beginning how we're doing this. It all comes down to the ruler tool. And we just measure how much space is there from the very top. We get around 32 pixels, and let's see how much space is on the left, and we get around 32 pixels. So padding top, when I measured it the first time when I created this site, I got 31. It's probably a little more close. And padding bottom, 18 pixels, once again using the ruler. And margin bottom, I'm going to make sure that there's no margins on the bottom of the heading. Text shadow, and here is a cool new CSS3 feature. If you look very closely, you can see that Sean has applied a little bit of a black shadow just to make it easier to read on top of that complicated background. Now we could use that as an image, or we could use a CSS3 feature called text shadow. Now it's not going to work in every single browser, but it will work in modern browsers, and considering this is for a modern app site, you can pretty much rest assured that most people are going to be using modern browsers. So we'll do text shadow. The first one is going to be the shadow to the left will be none. The shadow from the top will be 1 pixel down, and then the third value is going to be the how blurry should the shadow be, how stretched. And I'm going to set 3 pixels, and we're going to do black. If I come back to Firefox and I refresh the page and I zoom in, sure enough, you can see we have a little bit of a shadow there, all with CSS. Really neat, huh? So now, let's see. Let's go back to our banner. And we need to do a little bit more to push it away from the edge. So I'm going to set margin top. All of this is just a matter of measuring. Color needs to be white, just in case we have paragraph tags. That's probably not even necessary. I could probably get rid of that. Padding left is 34 pixels. Remember, we measured that. And I'm going to set a new positioning context. Because I'm going to position elements within it absolutely, we need to set a positioning context. And we're going to set the height equal to 284 pixels, which incidentally is the exact same height as the banner BG image. All right, and now we have, if I zoom out just a little bit, it's all lining up nicely. So now let's style the rest. Come down to the very bottom, banner H2. Let's now style the paragraph tags. And what we'll do is set a margin top equal to 0. And the reason we're doing this is because we can then set a border top of 1 pixel solid. And let's just measure that. We can now set a border top of our paragraph equal to this value at the bottom. And like so. Then we're going to do a font size of 20 pixels. Once again, I just clicked on the character palette and measured it, and it came to 20 pixels and a line height of 36 pixels. And we're going to set a margin right of 350 pixels. And I'm going to do the same thing with our heading tag. And I'm going to show you why in just a minute. You see here how the underline stretches for the entire width of our banner? We don't want that because remember, we're going to take the phone and push it right here. So we're going to set margins. And you can see now they only take up that much space. So you might be thinking, well, why don't you just set a width? In general, it's a bad idea to set width. If you can get around it and use margins instead, always do that. So that's what we're doing here. If I zoom in at the very top, where is my border? Let's find this. Let's change it to red. I always change things to red so I can easily find them, but I cannot find the border top. And that's why. There we go. And now if you zoom in, because we set the top margin of the paragraph equal to 0, they line up perfectly and you get a nice little inset feel if you look at it. Okay? Very fun. These are the specifics that really make designs nice looking. So the next step is, let me take a look at my notes. We also need to add he has a text shadow on the paragraph text as well, I believe. Yeah, if you look over it, he adds a text shadow as well, so we're going to add that in to our paragraph tag. and it will be text shadow 0, 1 pixel down, 3 pixels blurry, and it's going to be pretty much the exact same thing. So that should be just about good. I'm going to set a padding top of 25 pixels because we set the margins to 0. And come back here, and that'll just push it down from the edge up here. Okay, so that's looking really nice, and it's all selectable. It looks great. Now we want to style the phone and push that phone all the way over here like we have in our design. And the way we can do that, it's much easier than you might think. We're going to do banner img with an ID of phone is what we gave it, and we're going to set the positioning to absolute. And that's easy to do because we've set a positioning context above. And we're going to set the right, and this once again is just a matter of finding how far from the right edge are you. Okay, you're about 80 pixels, and how far from the top edge are you, and so forth. And then you may need to play around with it a little bit more. When I did it, I got right 101 pixels. That's what I got, and top of around 38 pixels. Yeah, and there you go. And it's perfect. Now, I need to clarify, look, watch what happens when we remove the positioning context and we refresh the page. That's interesting. It should pop up. Maybe I didn't save it. But yes, in general, you need to set a positioning context. Otherwise, when you position something absolute, it'll be positioned in relation to the nearest parent that is positioned. Kind of hard to explain. And now let's do the download link. So banner img download. And we're going to set a position once again to absolute. And when I measured it with the ruler tool in Photoshop, I got left of 190. And the bottom, we want to push it down negative 45 pixels. So it's there. We really want it to be here. Refresh. Perfecto. Looks good. The only other thing we need to do here is remember the Aurora app is styled differently, and we added strong tags around that. If I can find it. Yeah, remember? Right there. So what we can do is banner P strong, and we'll do color, and we could just measure it, or I already have it down, and it is 131828. There we go. So just to make sure the text shadow is showing up, actually it's not. Text shadow, and I did it again. I keep doing that. There it goes. All right, look how good that looks. Let's go back to TextMate, and now we are ready to work on our main section. So main, I'm going to set clear both, and this is going to make sure that it clears anything floated above it. And I'm going to set a padding top is 50 pixels, and a margin top is negative 50 pixels. This is really confusing, and trust me, it confuses me too. When I first built this site, it was there was a weird spacing issue in IE, and this was the way I got it to work. Was I set a negative margin in IE to negative 50 pixels, and then I used padding, and that fixed it in all of the browsers. I could try to explain it to you, but truthfully, sometimes you just have to accept that IE is really weird, and it requires really weird properties to make it work, and instead of dragging my hair out or pulling my hair out, it's easier to just do it this way. And this is padding 70 pixels for modern browsers that know what they're doing. And now you can see we have that spacing. If we come back to Photoshop, we have some spacing as well. Just accept it. Main H4 and main H3, we're going to style these, and we're going to set a color of, let's go pick up that color. It's kind of darkish blue. Okay, and text shadow, because those have one too, is 0, 1 pixel from the top, 1 pixel shadow, and to get the actual blur, or I'm sorry, the shadow color is if I can find it, where are you? Okay, just get the eyedropper tool, zoom in very closely, and you can just click on that with the eyedropper, and you will get a value of Shouldn't be white, it should be a grayish color. There it is. 949 EA9. Come back to TextMate and paste that in. Okay, and now we have that shadow. Good. Let's continue on. Now we need to style them. So we'll do main H3, and we're going to set a margin bottom of 0 first. And main H4 is margin bottom of 9 pixels. And the reason I did this is, if we come back, I'll explain this a little bit more later. We need to go ahead and set up our grid. Let's go back to index.html, stretch this out a little bit. And let's see, we have grid 12 main. I need to add a class of grid 12 and a class of, I forgot to do this, I'm sorry, grid 4, because it's separated into 3 columns, so 4 times 3 is 12. Save it, and 960 should take care of the rest, and now we have 3 columns. Actually, we only have 2. It looks like this third one right here doesn't want to push over. Let's figure out why. We have grid 4. That should be doing the trick for us. There's probably some styling that'll clear up once we get there. But anyways, the reason I set the margins the way I did is because I wanted the beginning of the text to line up correctly. So if you set it, that did it perfectly. Okay, and that's where I came. Let's come back to TextMate and continue on. We're now going to style the main UL, all of the list items within the main. And we're going to set a margin left equal to 15 pixels, a margin bottom, we're going to give them some breathing room of 10 pixels. We're going to set a line height. Once again, this is all just that character palette in Photoshop. And the font size within the character palette came to 13 pixels. Okay, looks better. Continuing on, so now let's style some specifics. So we're going to do main sub 1 and H3. And we will do font size. I measured it and it came to 36 pixels tall and a margin top of, I had to do a little bit of trickery to get this all to line up correctly. Okay, so that should be bigger. We might even want to add a little more spacing shortly. So the margin top is negative 17 pixels, and now let's do main sub 1 P, and that text will be font weight. He did a lot of bold text on here, so that should be bold. And truthfully, it might be smarter if we just put this within, because he used it in all of them. That's probably smarter. That way we don't have to continue declaring that every single time, and I can get rid of that. Save a little bit of space. Now let's do main sub 1 li, and the list style is going to be none. We're going to float them to the left. This is targeting the screenshots. And I'm going to set margin left equal to 0, because I want them right against that left edge. And we're going to set the margin right instead to 5 pixels. Fresh, and now they're floated to the left. The right edge lines up perfectly here. And next, so let's see. Let's go back to TextMate and come down a little bit more. And now we're going to do the second one. So main sub 2 list items, and that's going to be a font weight. We don't need that anymore. We will do list style. Once again, none. Margin left equals 0. We might be able to group these a little bit later. Padding left of 15 pixels and a background. And you know what? I don't think we did this together. I'll show you how in just a moment. It's a bullet. You'll see this when you have specialized bullets. We don't want it to repeat. And we're going to push it 50% from the top. If I come back, you'll see that's how we changed it to black. And that was just simply a matter of selecting it, saving it for the web, and giving it a name of bullet. Okay, and then we set the bullet as a background, put it all the way to the left and 50% from the top. Main sub 3. This is the third column, and we're going to set a margin top of quite a bit because it needs to clear this phone right here. So it can't all the way be up here. If you look in Photoshop, it needs to have quite a bit of margin to push it below the phone. And that's not showing up because we need to figure out why this is being pushed down to the bottom. And truthfully, I don't know. It's probably something I forgot to put in. Grid 4, sub 3 is grid 4. Well, it should be working. I'm trying to figure out, there's got to be some styling or maybe an extra width that was applied that is pushing that below. Well, we'll come back to it because I'm sure we'll figure it out shortly. Main sub 3, and now let's do main sub 3 P. Font size, I measured it and it came to 12 pixels. So now what we need to do is add a border. Each of these in Photoshop have a nice little border. But once again, Sean is using, rather than just 2 different colors, he's using 3 colors. So what I did was I flattened the image and then I selected these. You may have to zoom in all the way. And I selected them like so, and I saved it for the web, and I called it border 2 or border background, something like that. And now we're going to set that as a background. So sub 3 is P, and now we're going to do another one, and we'll do main sub 3 P first child. This is an advanced selector. We're going to set a background is URL img border2.png. Repeat it along the x-axis, and 0, 100% from the top. And actually what we're styling here, and that's not even showing up. Let's see if I have it, border2.png. And actually what we styled here, why is that not showing up? img border2.png. Repeat x, 100% from the top. And what we can do here is set padding bottom is 14 pixels and a margin bottom of 14 pixels as well. And that just does not want to show up. Okay, so if we need debugging, is probably an important thing to demonstrate here. If I click on it, and let's see. It must be, maybe I'm targeting it wrong. Oh, of course. These stupid things that you never see when you are recording. Refresh the page. Oh my gosh, it's still not coming up. Save the page. Main sub 3, of course. There it goes. Sorry about that. If you come down, we're actually styling this, and I got that background as well. Okay, sorry that took so long. So the next one is main sub 3 li, all of the list items within there, and we're going to once again set a background of that, and we're going to set a font weight of bold, but we've already done that, so we don't have to worry about that. Font style needs to be italic, and padding bottom 14 pixels and margin bottom 14 pixels. I'm going to explain the advantage of doing it that way in just a second. Okay. Each of those has a nice spacing. So what if we decided, you know what, let's just do it margin bottom 28. Can you see we have a margin, but there's no padding. And alternatively, if we changed it to, where are you? Right here, padding, and we refresh the page, it's still not perfect. You can see there's still some extra spacing. So sometimes it's easiest if you just split it in half, and that way you have equal margin and equal padding. And that looks a lot better. Now what we need to do here is we don't want there to be a bottom border on the very last item. That doesn't make sense. So the way we can do that, once again with CSS, is main sub 3 list items, but get the very last one. So we're going to do list last child and background of none. And that gets rid of it. Okay, good. So now let's style the footer. And we're going to do footer wrap. Remember, that's the wrapping div. And here, we're going to do overflow hidden. We're going to set the font size to 12 pixels because that's what I measured in Photoshop. And the font weight needs to be bold. and the padding bottom is 32 pixels. Where'd it go? Okay, it pushed it all the way up there, and that's because, remember, we created a new positioning, a new container grid. So what we should probably do is have a clear div somewhere. Let me think the best way to do this. Give me just a moment. We could stretch this out again. Within, before the footer, what if we added div style equals clear, both? Yeah, and that pushes it down, but that's not really what we want. I think it would be easier. The 960 comes with a few classes. It comes with the clearfix hack. And you see it right here. He added a clearfix, a class of clearfix, and it will force it to clear its contents, and that's what we're going to use here. And that way we don't have to worry about adding this unsemantic div. And what we'll do here is at the main div above it, we have a class of grid 12. But you know what? I think we do need that. Let's add clearfix. No, that's still doing it. I noticed this yesterday. It seems like when having multiple classes, it gets kind of strange when you have that underscore. Yeah, look at that. I removed the underscore. I don't know. Let's take that out because it's not necessary because the grid 12 is implied. Yeah, there we go. Okay, that was the problem. Was I had grid 12 and it was implied that we don't need it because it can still reference the one above. Okay, that fixes it, and we've also applied our clearfix hack, which will force the information below. Okay, so now we're starting to get a nice looking site. Very cool. So let's come back to style and footer wrap. Let me go back to my notes that I'm working off of, and we're going to go to footer. And what we'll say is overflow. Once again, we're going to be floating a lot of stuff, so it's just almost a habit to add overflow hidden. Font size. Plus, it fixes a lot of IE6 issues, by the way. Font weight is bold, but we don't need that, I don't believe. And padding, bottom. We want to give it some breathing room at the very bottom so that we can scroll below. Okay? Remember, we're styling this. Well, I can't select it. Everything up here to down here. So we should now set a background. So footer wrap is... Oh, look, I just totally duplicated that. I have to put that all in font, and then the footer wrap, all we're going to do here is set a background. And that's going to be URL, and it's going to be img / I called it footer bg. I believe we cut this out together. And we want it to repeat along the x-axis. But we also want to set the background color equal to that dark blue as well. So let's get that color, select it with the eyedropper tool, come back to TextMate, 45 minutes, that should be fine, and set it as a background color. And now it stretches. And the advantage to this, remember, instead of setting this whole background from up here to down here, is now, if we come back here to footer, I can find it and refresh, it extends, and that's what we want. We need it to be as large or as small as possible. Okay, that fixes that. So let's come back to TextMate, go back to our style, and continue on. Now what we're going to do is footer div last child, div last child, a button, is we're going to style the buttons accordingly. So we're going to do display block, width is 90 pixels. This is going to take care of the Twitter bird, by the way. So we're kind of going out of order. I could probably do this a little bit later. Let me go ahead and type it down. And that styles that. So what we need to do now is let's take care of our buttons. And because it's a button, I like to put it at the very top around my general styles. So right up here, go back to my notes and let's see how we can style this. It's actually going to take quite a few. We're going to set a position context. Position is relative, and then we're going to set a background color, and that's a matter of just clicking on the eyedropper tool and finding what color that background is of each button. And I got to 5E7285, And then we're going to set a border top. Scroll to the bottom. You can see here the border top has kind of a lighter blue color. That's what I'm setting it to. So border top will be 1 pixel solid, and I can do A3, B5, D4. And that's obviously not right. Let's see. Zoom all the way in. And I don't think it's picking that up, so let's do it again. Maybe I put in the wrong value. No? Weird. Okay. And now it's showing up. I have no idea. Maybe I'm just missing a value. So let's come back and back to our button. So we have our border top. We're actually adding a lot here. I measured the padding, and once again it was 6 pixels and 9 pixels around. And now we're going to add some browser styling. So mods border radius 7 pixels. That'll take care of Mozilla. And now we need to do WebKit, and this will take care of WebKit, which is Safari and Chrome. WebKit border radius 7 pixels. Next, let's set a border all around it. So it's going to be 1 pixel solid. Actually, we had that all around. I thought it was just on the top, so we can get rid of that entirely. And the next one is text decoration, no underline for our buttons. And we're going to add a text shadow because I believe it has one. Yeah, that text has a shadow below it. So once again, we're going to do 0 pixels, 1 pixel, 0, black. Font size, measured it in the character palette, it was 13 pixels. Make sure the font is bold. And we're going to do a new one. Moz, this is kind of a fun one. Moz box shadow. And 0, 1 pixel. And let's just set it to red just to demonstrate what it's going to look like. If I zoom in, can you see it adds a shadow around? So we're actually mimicking this button so we don't have to copy it. And we want that dark, subtle background around it. So if you see red, that's exactly what we want. That way we get a border of the light blue, but then we get another layer of border. So let's come back and let's reassign it to the color of, I think I just did black. And WebKit has their own as well. WebKit. And now if I zoom in, you can see that there's 2 layers, and that's just a really nice and subtle feature to make it look nicer. The final thing we need to do is give some feedback when the user hovers over a button. So a button hover, and it's going to be background just kind of a darker color, so 4A5969. Refresh, and now if I hover over it, good. Perfect buttons. Now this is not perfect. We're going to have to fix that. Scroll all the way to the bottom back to where we were working. And we have our last child. We are styling that button for the Twitter bird because that needs to be a little bit different. Give me just a minute to find my spot. Okay, so we have a width of 90 pixels, margin top of 30 pixels. So now we'll do footer, ULLI. We'll come back to that. List style is going to be none. Margin left, we want to push it up against the left edge again. Padding bottom is 11 pixels. All of this is measuring. I've said this so many times, but it's important if you're ever confused how I got a value. It's all just measuring from the Photoshop file. Border bottom, 1 pixel, dashed, CCC. Okay, so footer, last child. Footer, LI, last child. And this is going to target the last child right here. Okay. And what we'll do here is set the border bottom to none. Okay. And that's because we're going to be setting a border to each of them, so we're doing the same thing where you get the last item and make sure that it doesn't have a border at all. And there we go. Okay, so we get that nice dashed border, but it's still showing up at the very bottom. Let me check. And there they go. Perfect. So now let's see what else. Footer li span, and let's see what this is targeting because I've already forgotten. Footer, oh yes, span. Remember on the tweets how long ago we can target those and style them differently, so we want to make sure they look like this. Come back to TextMate, go back to our style sheet, and footer li span is going to be color of, and I got 85A1BC, and we're going to set the display to block because I want those to be on their own line, and a margin top of around 5 pixels, and also font weight to be normal. There you go. They're on their own line, and that's what display block does. By the way, notice when we select these, it's really hard to read. We can fix that. We'll do that a little bit later. So come back, footer li span. Now let's indent that. Footer lia, and make sure we get rid of the underline just in case there is one. Yeah, and there was. Okay, so now we have our links. It's looking good. So we do need a little bit of padding up there, but we'll come back to that. So let's now do footer h4, and the color is going to be 85. It's going to be this color right here. Text shadow, 0, 1 pixel from the top, 3 pixel blur, and a black shadow. Font size, I measured it, and it came to 20 pixels and a line height of 24 pixels. And a margin top, once again, we're going to set it equal to the line height. Okay, and now you can see we were styling all these and we have a little bit more space. The only other thing I want to do is make sure we get the padding bottom correct. And we'll do padding bottom 16 pixels. Okay, and that pushes it down. Let's see how the Photoshop file looks. It has that, but also look how it has a border. And I don't think we've added that yet, so we need to do that right now. After our padding, we're going to do background. And rather than doing the border trick, we're going to use a background. And img/border.png. Repeat along the x-axis, 0 from the left and 100% from the top. And to get that, you zoom in, you flatten your image, you select this, and you save it as border PNG. Okay. And perfect. Looks great. Now the final thing we need to do is we got to fix the Twitter bird, but we'll come back to that. And we got to get this very bottom area so that it looks like this section down here. Let's take a look at our HTML, and we have a bottom wrap, and we have the bottom div. So bottom, and we're going to do bottom wrap. We need to add that new background so that it extends for the entire width of the screen. Background URL img bottom bg.png, and repeat it along the x-axis. And there you go. Now we have that nice shadow. Perfect. And we will do bottom, and we're going to do overflow hidden because we're going to be floating some things once again. You will be so tired of my voice by the time this is over. 30 pixels, and that's just giving it some breathing room at the bottom. You can see that, right? So continuing on, we're going to do bottom wrap, bottom, and we don't even need that first div, so but we're going to do p first child, and we are going to style that float left. And this is, once again, I wish I had IE. I need to install a virtual drive on this laptop, but basically it was needed for an IE fix. I got it to work without floating it, but when I viewed this site in IE, it was pushing this navigation down a block. So the way to fix it in IE was just to go ahead and float that first paragraph. And I'm targeting it as the first child because you never know if later somebody will add an additional paragraph. So that wouldn't be needed. We would be floating every paragraph. So here I'm only floating the very first one. And that's why I'm going to add weird IE fix. it's always important to sometimes target your IE fixes so that you'll remember when you come back to it 6 months later what you were thinking. Bottom wrap P, and also bottom wrap P. This is going to target all anchor tags and paragraphs. And the color I measured was 212B3F. And the font weight is bold. I don't think that's necessary. I can't remember. We'll keep it in there. And display is inline. There we go. Looks good. So now we need to take this footer nav and push it all the way to the right. So we're going to do bottom, UL, float it to the right, and overflow hidden. Yeah, if I remember correctly, we added an ID here, footer nav, and truthfully, I don't even think we will need that, so let's get rid of it. There we go. Now it's already floated to the left. Now we need to take each of those list items within it and flip those to the left. Set the list style to none. There we go. Good. Continue on. Let's do a little bit more. Font weight. Are they bold yet? No. Font weight. Bold. And once again, to determine if it was bold, selected, and you can see it was 13 pixels tall and a font weight of bold. So just in case I haven't, let's assign a font weight, a font size of 13 pixels. Okay, and now let's target the one that was selected. So bottom LI with the class of selected, and then we're going to get the anchor tag. And then we're also going to get it when you hover over any anchor tag within that section. And all we're going to do is set the color to white and the text decoration underline. Because remember, in the Photoshop, the selected one has an underline and it's bold and the color is white. So you hover over it and we did something wrong. Let's first bottom LIA, and let's set the color to that, and text decoration is none. Refresh, and that's better. And now when you hover over it, the underline and the text turns white and the selected one remains white. So let's go back to Photoshop and let's zoom out and see if everything's correct. Yeah, looks great. Really close. So I'm going to zoom all the way out and let's see if we have to do anything final. Zoom all the way in. You hover over the buttons, you get this nice, I'm trying to do this before my battery runs dry. We have our heading, which is a logo. We now need to set this up where, remember right here, that it has this background for the selected one. And I wanted to hold off on when we did that because it wasn't necessary, but let's go ahead and take care of it right now. And go back to TextMate. So basically we want the selected app to have that background, but also when you hover over an app, we want to give it that background too. So we've added a class of current. Let's go up here to the very top, and we're going to go down to the apps section right around here, and we will do it right there. Apps, the current app, and then also when you hover over an app. So apps, UL, LI, hover, and we're applying a hover. The hover event to the list item, which will not work in older versions of IE, but we will get around to that. So we're going to set a background equal to 475665. Let's see how we got that. We took the value of the background, and then also what I did was I had to get this background, so I flattened the image, and then I just grabbed a small piece from the very top, like so. You might need to zoom in further, like this. Okay, flatten the image, copied it to a new file, saved for the web, and I called it current app BG. img/current app bg.png. Repeat x. Okay, and now we have the background. But all we need to do now is get our ruler tool, measure how much space we have from here to here, here to here, and what I got was padding 17 pixels on the top and bottom and 15 pixels on the left and right. Okay, and now we have a little more space. We need to make it rounded like Sean had, so let's go back and we're going to do border 1 pixel solid. Measuring it came to 28313B. Okay. Moz border radius, and I set 10 pixels. WebKit border radius also at 10 pixels, and a margin top of -18 pixels. And I'll show you why. If I can find Firefox, that pushes it up. So let's go a little bit deeper and get rid of that and refresh the page. What I needed to have happen is, if you look in Photoshop, they line up perfectly with each other. So if I take my rulers and drag it down, you see how that lines up perfectly, each one of those little apps. If we go to get our ruler, we want to make sure, I can't do it now, do it above. All of those need to line up perfectly, but you see the selected one is pushed down. And so that is why we set the margin top to -18 pixels, and that pushes them up perfectly together. Okay, so that looks good. We have a background, we have a border, padding, but now look what happens when you hover over it. You see that big twitch? So what we need to do is style those specifically. So we'll do, let me find it, apps ULLI hover. And what we'll do is margin left, and to be honest, I kind of had to just play around with this for a while. Margin right is 28 pixels. And I hover over it, now it's fixed. So there's probably a mathematical, if you look at the current margins of there and then you compensate for the added padding. Sometimes it's easier just to go into Firebug and play around with it until you get it right. Okay, it's quicker. Maybe it's not as mathematical. But now look, we have a new problem. I hover over these and it works perfectly. But this one has already had that styling applied, so when you hover over it, it gets all messed up. So what we need to do is find a way to say, find all list items, but not the one that has a class of selected, and then apply this when you hover over it. So you might think, oh, that's not possible with CSS. In older browsers, frankly, no, it's not. But there is a way to do it with an advanced selector that a lot of modern browsers can read. And we would do apps, get all unordered lists, but not the current, whoops, that does not need, working in JavaScript again, but not the current one, and then when you hover over that. So this will apply to all list items that do not have a class of current. And now we hover over it, works perfectly. We hover over this one and nothing occurs because it's not being attached to any kind of listener. Perfect. So I'm not saving that. So let's zoom in and let's see our finished project. I'm almost certain I forgot something. That looks all good. You have that. You have your features. We need to take a look at, I'm thinking the padding here is a little too much, but we'll come back to that. Oh yeah, we do need to fix this little Twitter bird. So let's come down to the very bottom. It's going to be footer. Let me find it. Footer li less child. Where is that? But there it is. There's the button. So, we have clear both. We have a margin. We have a width of 90 pixels. Maybe we need to set this a little bigger. Yeah, and that makes it bigger. That's why. The Twitter bird is within the anchor tag, so it's being forced to contain it. What we need to do is target the image within it and style it differently. And let me see how I can best do that. Anchor tag with the class of button, get the image within it, and position absolute. Let's see what happens now. Yeah, there we go. And now maybe we can just do top, think of 30 pixels. And this is when Firebug comes in handy. So I can click on my Twitter bird, and we have our styling. We can go to layout, and we can play with it. So we have an offset of 30. Let's do it a little bit more. That looks good. So margin top of -40, and left. I think that looks pretty good. It's close enough. So margin top of -40, or top of -40, and left of 65. There we go. Easy peasy. Okay, 19 minutes. The final thing I want to do is just make sure that that is lined up correctly. So what you can do here is, I'm actually doing this one on the spot. Let's get our ruler tool, and let's measure that. And it's about 34 pixels from the top, and that's definitely more. So what we can do here is, let's grab that. And let me see here. So the feature should be just a little bit under that button, but it's quite a bit. So let's get our main div, get the layout, and the margin top, -50. Or I'm sorry, the offset. Let's do this. Sometimes it helps me. Let's find main. And we'll set a background of red just to find out if it's lining up correctly. Kind of a debugging. Okay, so padding top, margin top. Why don't we set the padding top lowered, like 50? And that pushes it up, and I think that's much better. And that falls into line, but we already have that. So what is that even needed for? Yeah, I'm sorry, I just added an extra property that was not necessary. Get rid of that, come back to Firefox, zoom out just a little bit, and this is more or less our site. So we just want to make sure everything lines up. All of the edges on the right line up. All of the edges on the left line up perfectly. And I believe that's our site. So there's the final thing I need to show you really quickly is this is going to look great in all browsers. It does not work in IE6. To be honest, I haven't even looked at it in IE6. This is an iPhone app site. I think you can be almost 98% sure that they're not using IE6. So we need to be getting away from that anyway. So it's important to when you can avoid it, do avoid it. In a site like this, we can avoid IE6. But in IE7 and 8, we cannot. We're using some advanced properties that IE7 does not recognize. Now, does that mean you shouldn't use them? No. There are ways to use a JavaScript file to force it. And so I'm going to search for IE8 by Dean Edwards. I'm going to need a little bit more than that. Dean Edwards, where is it? There it is, IE7. Dean Edwards created a script that allows you to use advanced selectors in IE. So we simply copy that, and at the top, paste it in, and we're saying if the user is browsing with if less than IE8, then import these scripts. So if we go now, and I'm sorry, I just don't have a way to show you on this computer, but just rest assured that in IE8, if you did not have that script, like something like the border at the very bottom of each of these would show up because it would not recognize the last child. But when you do import that JavaScript file, it then does. Okay. And the final thing I want to show you is I had one fix for IE8. And we're going to say if less than or equal to IE8, and all I had to do was just one style, and I could probably, if I spent more time with it, I could find a way not to do this, but I want to set the padding bottom to 0. In IE8, right here where the footer begins, there was this huge space between this lighter blue and the darker blue. Too much. And I found in IE the way to fix that was just to reset the padding. The final thing we have to do, with 17 minutes left, is we need to compensate for when this is hovered over. IE will not recognize that really advanced selector that we did. Let me see if I can find it. It's not even necessary. This one right here, apps not current hover. IE, even with the IE8.js file, it doesn't read that. So what we're going to use is jQuery to attach that. So we can copy that, and we're going to go to the bottom, and this has pretty much been your tutorial. So if you're done, thank you so much for watching. But if you want to learn how to fix this in IE8, we're going to use jQuery, and with jQuery we can use those advanced selectors. So we're going to add a if IE might be smarter to do IE8 or below. Yeah, you know what, I'm going to do that. It's always important to be safe. Okay, and all we're going to do is import a script. So script, we're first going to import jQuery, and then we're going to import a script tags, and we will just say a var apps li, and this is going to cache all of the list items within the apps div. And then the next one we're going to do is left, and this is going to hold the original margin left value for each list item. So apps li.css. And remember, when you're working with jQuery, you don't do margin dash left, you use it as camel case. And right equals apps li.css, margin right. That way we have those values in variables. And now we're going to say get apps li, but not, once again, but not the current one. Dot hover is function, and this is going to accept two functions. The first one is going to be when you mouse over, and the second one is going to be when you mouse out. Okay, so when you mouse over it, we're just simply going to get the item that was hovered over, and we're going to set the CSS, and we're going to set the margin left equal to what we had before in our style sheet, which was -15 pixels, and we're going to set the margin right equal to 28 pixels. And that's good. And now when you hover out, we're going to do the same thing again, but we're going to reset those values back to what they were originally before they were hovered over. So this.css, margin left, and that's going to be equal to the variable, right? Because otherwise we'd have no way of knowing what was the original value. And that should do it. So that will take care of that in IE. So it's a little convoluted, and you could even do something in IE, just not have that show up, but this will take care of it. Although we are having that little extra. Okay, and then go back. Look at that. I was thinking we could, if less than or equal to IE8, there's something wrong here. No, that's all right. This script should not be running. Oh, there it is. How did that get in there? Probably another thing you guys have been seeing for a long time, I just noticed, because I'm too busy yabbering. Yeah, there it goes. Sorry about that. And now that'll work in that, and it'll work in IE8, 7, and who cares about IE6? So this was a really long screencast. Good job if you watched the whole thing. I apologize. My voice must be completely irritating to you by now, if it wasn't at the beginning. But for the best tips and tutorials and screencasts available on the web, please visit net.tutsplus.com and subscribe to our RSS feed. You can additionally follow us at twitter.com/nettuts. I keep you updated on important events, news, and completely meaningless things on movies I go to see. And you can also follow me personally at jeffreyway.com. So thank you guys so much, and I will see you next week. We might get back into CodeIgniter next week. So thanks so much. Bye-bye.